The deeper truth running through this entire discussion is that intimacy is never just physical. What happens between two people in those moments is not simply about bodies meeting. It is about nervous systems communicating, emotions opening, trust being tested, and vulnerability being exchanged in ways many couples never fully understand. Most men spend years believing that intimacy is primarily about performance, stamina, technique, or doing the right things physically. But what women consistently experience and respond to most deeply is something far more subtle and far more powerful: emotional safety, patience, attentiveness, and presence. The female body is not mechanical. It does not respond like a switch that flips on instantly. It responds like a process, gradual, layered, emotional, neurological, and deeply connected to how safe and understood a woman feels in the moment. Before penetration ever happens, her entire nervous system is already deciding whether her body can fully open, soften, and receive pleasure comfortably. That opening is not only physical, it is psychological. Her body must feel there is no pressure, no urgency, no sense that she is being rushed toward an outcome. When that safety exists, her body naturally moves through the stages of arousal exactly as it was designed to. Blood flow increases, sensitivity deepens, tension releases, lubrication develops, and her entire pelvic floor relaxes into openness. What many men interpret as chemistry is often simply the result of whether this process was respected or interrupted. One of the most important realizations any man can have is this: foreplay is not separate from intimacy, it is intimacy. The slow kissing, the touch, the eye contact, the emotional connection, the laughter, the patience, the feeling that there is nowhere else you need to be. All of that is what allows a woman's body and mind to fully arrive. When those elements are missing, penetration may still happen physically, but the experience often lacks the depth, comfort, and emotional immersion her body is capable of experiencing. And this is where so many long-term relationships quietly drift apart. Not because love disappears, but because attentiveness disappears. Routine replaces curiosity. Speed replaces presence. Couples stop slowing down long enough to truly feel each other again. Over time, intimacy becomes functional instead of connective. One partner believes everything is fine because the relationship still exists, while the other slowly feels emotionally unseen inside the experience itself. What this entire conversation reveals is that women often experience intimacy as an emotional language as much as a physical one. During penetration, her body is not only responding to stimulation, it is responding to tone, rhythm, patience, breathing, touch, and emotional energy. Her nervous system is constantly asking unspoken questions. Am I safe here? Am I cherished? Is he present with me or simply pursuing an outcome? Is this about connection or performance? The answers to those questions shape her experience more than most men realize. The neurochemistry involved also matters profoundly. During deeply connected intimacy, hormones like oxytocin increase feelings of trust, bonding, closeness, and emotional attachment. This is one reason women often describe fulfilling intimacy not merely as pleasurable, but as emotionally grounding, calming, or deeply connecting. For many women, the most meaningful experiences are not necessarily the most intense or athletic moments. They are the moments where they felt fully received, fully seen, and emotionally safe enough to let go completely. And perhaps the most important lesson of all is that genuine intimacy cannot be forced through technique. There is no perfect move, no universal script, and no shortcut around emotional presence. A woman's body responds most deeply when she senses sincerity, when she feels that your attention is truly with her, when your touch feels patient instead of demanding, when your pace communicates that her comfort matters more than your urgency, when she feels that you are listening not only with your ears, but with your hands, your eyes, your breathing, and your awareness. This changes the way a man approaches intimacy entirely. Instead of asking, "How do I perform better?" the better question becomes, "How do I help her feel safer, more relaxed, more emotionally connected, and more understood?" That shift alone transforms everything, because the body naturally follows where emotional safety leads. It also explains why the most meaningful intimate experiences are often the quietest ones, the moments where there is no rushing, no pressure to impress, no obsession with outcomes, just two people fully present with each other, a hand resting gently on her body, slow breathing in sync, sustained eye contact, softness, patience, a feeling that time has slowed down. Those moments communicate love and security to the nervous system more powerfully than intensity ever can. For men, especially men who have spent years believing intimacy is primarily about physical execution, this understanding can feel almost revolutionary. But it is also deeply freeing, because true intimacy is not about being flawless. It is about being attentive. It is about slowing down enough to notice her responses instead of following a mental script. It is about understanding that her body is constantly communicating with you if you learn to pay attention. Her breathing changes, her muscles soften, her body moves closer, her nervous system relaxes. Those signals matter far more than performance ever will. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of all this. Great intimacy is not built through pressure. It is built through trust, through consistency, through emotional safety repeated over time, through small moments of patience and care that gradually teach another person. You are safe with me. You do not need to brace yourself here. You can fully arrive here. That is what women are often longing for beneath the surface. Not perfection, not endless intensity, not a performance, but presence. Real, grounded, attentive presence. The feeling that they are being met emotionally as well as physically. The feeling that intimacy is not something being taken from them, but something being created together. And when a man truly understands that, intimacy stops being about technique entirely. It becomes connection in its purest form. The deeper message woven throughout this entire discussion is that truly fulfilling intimacy is never just about physical technique. It is about understanding the profound connection between the body, the nervous system, emotions, trust, and presence. Most men enter relationships believing intimacy is primarily driven by desire, performance, or instinct. Yet what shapes a woman's experience most powerfully is often invisible to the eye. It is the emotional environment surrounding the experience, the sense of safety in her body, the patience in your pace, the quality of your attention, and the feeling that she is fully met rather than merely physically engaged. One of the most important truths revealed here is that female arousal is not automatic or mechanical. It is a carefully unfolding neurological and physiological process that begins long before penetration ever occurs. A woman's body does not simply react to stimulation, it responds to context. Her nervous system must feel safe enough to soften, open, and allow pleasure to deepen naturally. When that emotional and physiological preparation is respected, her body changes completely. Blood flow increases, sensitivity expands, lubrication develops, muscles release, and her entire pelvic system transitions from guardedness into receptivity. What many men mistakenly interpret as chemistry or compatibility is often simply the result of whether this process was given the time and care it requires. This understanding changes the meaning of intimacy entirely. Foreplay is no longer a warm-up before the main event. It becomes part of the core experience itself. The kissing, touching, breathing, eye contact, emotional closeness, and slow build of anticipation are not optional extras. They are the very things that allow a woman's body and mind to fully arrive. When intimacy is rushed, her nervous system often remains partially defended, even if she appears willing externally. But when she feels emotionally safe and genuinely desired, her body begins cooperating with the experience instead of resisting it. The role of oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone, reveals just how deeply emotional connection shapes physical intimacy. During moments of genuine closeness and penetration, a woman's brain releases oxytocin in ways that increase feelings of trust, attachment, safety, and emotional merging. This is not sentimental language. It is biological reality. The emotional atmosphere between two people literally changes the neurochemical experience inside the body. A man who is attentive, calm, emotionally present, and focused on her experience creates physiological conditions that intensify pleasure and deepen connection simultaneously. His presence becomes part of the sensation itself. And perhaps the most overlooked reality of all is the vulnerability a woman experiences during intimacy. Penetration requires openness on multiple levels, not only physical openness, but psychological openness as well. Her body must release protective tension and allow another person into a deeply private and vulnerable space. For many women, especially later in life, this vulnerability becomes even more emotionally significant. Aging often brings increased self-consciousness about the body, fears about desirability, and anxiety about how they are being perceived. In those moments, the way a man looks at her, touches her, and emotionally responds to her matters profoundly. Genuine desire communicated clearly and consistently tells her nervous system, "You are wanted exactly as you are." That message has enormous power. It quiets fear, it reduces defensiveness, it allows her body to trust. This is why emotional presence is not simply kindness. It is a physiological requirement for deep intimacy. A distracted, hurried, emotionally disconnected man cannot create the same experience as a man who is grounded, attentive, and fully with her. The nervous system always detects the difference. A woman can feel when intimacy is driven primarily by urgency, performance, or self-focus, and she can feel when it is driven by connection, patience, and genuine care. Her body responds differently to each. The practical lessons throughout this discussion are remarkably simple, yet profoundly important. Slow down, pay attention, let penetration begin gradually rather than abruptly. Listen to her breathing, observe her body language. Notice tension, softness, movement, stillness, or hesitation. Her body is communicating constantly. Men who focus entirely on themselves miss these signals and operate blindly. Men who become attentive to her responses gain access to a completely different level of intimacy because they are no longer following assumptions. They are responding to reality in real time. Consistency also matters more than many men realize. As arousal builds, a woman's nervous system locks into patterns of stimulation and rhythm. Sudden changes in pace or pressure often disrupt the very process that was building toward climax. One of the greatest forms of attentiveness a man can offer is the discipline to remain steady, patient, and responsive instead of constantly changing course. Deep intimacy often grows not from novelty, but from sustained presence. And what happens afterward matters just as much as what happens during. Many men underestimate the emotional significance of the moments immediately following intimacy. Yet this is often when a woman feels most emotionally open, chemically bonded, and psychologically vulnerable. Remaining close afterward, holding her, touching her gently, speaking softly, or simply staying emotionally present communicates something powerful to her nervous system. You are safe here. This connection continues. You are valued beyond the act itself. Over time, these moments shape the emotional security of the entire relationship. Conversely, emotional withdrawal immediately afterward can slowly damage trust without either partner fully understanding why. When a man abruptly disconnects, reaches for distractions, or emotionally leaves the moment, her nervous system often interprets it as abandonment or emotional separation. Repeated consistently over time, this creates guardedness and distance that slowly erode intimacy. The body remembers patterns even when words are never spoken about them. What this entire conversation ultimately reveals is that great intimacy has very little to do with performance and almost everything to do with awareness. Truly skilled lovers are not necessarily the most athletic, experienced, or technically impressive. They are the most attentive. They understand pacing, they understand emotional safety, they understand the nervous system, they know how to create an environment where another person feels relaxed enough to fully open emotionally and physically. This understanding becomes even more meaningful with age. In later decades of life, intimacy often becomes less about urgency and more about depth. Emotional maturity, patience, gentleness, and sustained connection become far more valuable than youthful intensity alone. The couples who continue growing closer over time are often the ones who learn how to slow down, stay emotionally present, and truly listen to each other's bodies and emotions rather than relying on routine or assumption. The greatest lesson here is beautifully simple. Intimacy is not something you do to someone. It is something you create with them. It is a shared emotional and neurological experience built through trust, presence, patience, and care. When a woman feels safe enough to fully relax into that experience, intimacy becomes more than physical pleasure. It becomes grounding, connecting, healing, and deeply human. And that is ultimately what most people are searching for beneath all the techniques, advice, and performance anxiety. Not perfection, not constant intensity, but genuine connection. The feeling of being completely seen, completely desired, completely safe, and completely met by another person in one of the most vulnerable moments two human beings can share.